long down the right side. Caught. Touchdown, Washington State.
He is there. Booby. Long three.
What a catch by Phillip Bobo.
The Palouse is going to pop.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of the Fieldhouse Report. Tonight, we have a very special guest, WSU and broadcast legend, Eric Johnson. How are you doing, sir?
Great to see you guys.
Yeah,
Great to
awesome
have you on here.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk Cougs, man. It's one of my favorite subjects.
All right. Well, how are you doing? How's retirement going? What's new?
You know, I won't bore you with all the details, but I absolutely love it. The nightly pressure of there's a 5 o'clock show and then a 6 o'clock show and then an 11 o'clock show. And it was great to crawl out from under that. I miss my storytelling. I miss telling those stories that I love so much. And I'm going to find ways to do it in other ways, but it's great. I'm just kind of easing into my days every day. I'm getting little routines. I go for a walk every day. I've written a novel that I'm trying to find an agent for, and I'm about to start another one. And playing a little golf. I'm just living, man, and I'm thrilled to death about it.
Can you share anything about those novels and maybe the context of them?
Oh, geez. That's the part of the problem with trying to find an agent is you do a synopsis of the novel. And every time I read my synopsis, I'm like, well, that sounds boring. It's not boring, but it sounds boring. The one is about my dad and I, and we built a 1940 Ford Coupe together when I was a kid. And this novel is about he and I taking off on a fictitious road trip in my 1940 Coupe to meet Bronco Nagurski, who's a famous running back for the Bears in the 1930s, and then was said to have worked at a gas station in upper Minnesota. So it's about this ride that we take, this adventure, and what happens along the way. And I think it turned out pretty well. I just have to find someone to believe in it. But everybody's written a book, so we'll see what happens. I'm not calling myself an author yet. I'm just trying to get something out there.
That is awesome. I love it. Well, I'm looking forward to that book release for sure. Now, out of all the things you're doing in retirement, it also sounds like you're keeping busy with Coups First as well.
I am. It's kind of funny. A couple people tried to get me to join the board, and right after I retired, and I'm like, geez, I don't know if I'm going to have enough time. I don't know how this is going to play out. And then finally, Jack Thompson just called me one day and said, you know what? Screw you. We took a vote. It passed unanimously. You're on the board. Deal with it. So that's how that came about. And you can't say no to Jack. And so I'm having a blast meeting new Cougs and learning how this whole thing fits together and how it works. And I'm excited about the upcoming event. And it's been cool. It's been a lot of fun.
That's awesome. So you will be at the event on May 9th there in Bellevue, and you have an interview with Dr. Canwell. Can you tell what questions you're anticipating asking?
I saw an interesting thing with her that she said she's spending 40% of her time dealing with athletics, which I was surprised that a president would admit that. I mean, she is all in. She wants to make Cougar athletics a viable thing. I'm going to ask her, of course, about that. I'm going to ask her about this crazy landscape that she's dealing with, not just athletically, but as a president of a university. These are strange times. I want to ask her about that. I want to ask her about marketing Washington State. And I've never felt like the Coug thing, that thing that lives in our hearts about the Cougs and being a Coug and Washington State. I want to figure out and ask her about how do we get that out there to the masses? How do we explain the inexplainable thing about being a Coug? And I think we need to do a better job of letting the world know how special that place is, because it is special. And so I want to talk to her about that. The closest I've seen really is that that video they play at the games. Is it after the first quarter where they show all the great plays? You know, that just gets my blood boiling, you know, and I feel so strongly and proud. We need some other things to capture that Coug special thing. And we need to sell that to the world.
Yep. Bottle Cougar Spirit and send it out to the masses, because it's a hard thing to explain. It's a hard thing to put into words. You've done a pretty good job in some of your stories.
Right. Try.
Yeah. Talking about, Kathy, Bob Robertson, Glenn Johnson, in those stories. Yeah. And all of those stories, I felt like, you felt that Cougar spirit kind of stirring in your soul as you listen to the words of those stories. So I think they might need to consult you a little bit before they come up with the next plan.
The check's in the mail. You know, one thing I think, I remember Mike Price way back in the day, and I was amazed at how he took a perceived negative and flipped it around and turned it into a positive. And what he said was, I tell parents when I get their kid here, I say, I'm going to take care of your son. And here's why I can do that. I know everybody in this town, and everybody in this town knows me. And I have spies out there, and we're watching out for your kid. And if he steps the wrong way, I'm going to hear about it. It's a small town. It's an isolated community. And he took that negative of being in the middle of nowhere and turned it into a positive. And anyone that spent any time at Washington State knows that being on the Palouse is not a negative. It's a negative if you've never been there and you've never experienced it. But if you've lived there and felt a part of it, it's not a negative at all. And we need to stop dancing away from that and embrace that and sell it to the world, because there's no place like it.
Yep. There really isn't. And I think, is it Jim Walden that was quoted as saying, I can't explain it to anybody, that, you go out to the middle of nowhere to only discover that it's the center of the universe,
Yeah.
And I feel that feeling. Mind you, I grew up in Los Angeles, big city.
Okay, I got to interrupt you because
oh no,
I either am the one who said that or I stole it from Jim Walden, because I wrote in a thing I did called "Why the Apple Cup Matters." I used those words, Darren. I said we were in the middle of nowhere for 4 years, only to learn that it's really the center of the universe. I hope I didn't subconsciously steal that from Walden.
I could have sworn that I initially saw it with context around Jim Walden, but given that you just spoke of Why the Apple Cup Matters, would you care to read what you wrote and share it with us?
I'll tell you a story. There was 2 women came up to me in the COUG one night and called it up on their phone and made me sit there and listen as they read the whole thing to me. It was surreal, and it was absolutely fantastic. I'll just read you the end of it, which is part of what I just said. I went in this whole thing about why it matters. I said, the original question, why does it matter so much? Well, it matters because we're Cougs, because we went out in the middle of nowhere for 4 years only to learn that it was really the center of the universe. Because the taste of victory means nothing if you haven't felt the sting of defeat. Because it is impossible to leave Pullman after 4 years and still take yourself too seriously. And because win or lose, Cougs always have each other. And sooner or later, we know we'll get that little engine to the top of that hill. To be a Coug is to believe. That's what I wrote on that thing. And I think that went out 5 years ago or something like that, and it still holds true. I think that's how I feel anyway.
I remember the morning you posted that, and I think it was the week of or the day of before the Apple Cup, and we got together with family, my Cougar family. Grandparents went to WSU, parents went to WSU, and I read that out loud. And every time I read it, when I got to that last line, I couldn't not read it without tearing up. and
Well,
still when you read it, because it hits your soul in a way that I can't really describe.
well, and that means I have trouble reading it too. That means that it came somewhere in the vicinity of capturing whatever that thing is that we feel.
Yeah.
It's a real tangible thing, but you have to be there to feel it. You have to walk those hills. You have to drive through those wheat fields. You have to be at the Coug. You have to, you just have to experience it to understand. And so we can tell non-Cougs all we want. We can tell Huskies till their faces are blue, and they'll never understand. And that's okay, isn't it? That's okay.
Okay.
We know the lasting impact that Washington State had on you. You obviously have tons of stories, tons of memories. But how did you get to Washington State? Every single time we interview a Coug, there's always an awesome story about, what pulled them to Pullman. So we'd love it if you could share yours real quick.
Sure. I only ever wanted to be a Coug. The only other school I considered was Notre Dame. And I don't know if I could have gotten into Notre Dame, but I found out that they didn't really have much of a broadcasting presence. And so then it was settled. When I was a kid, we drove from the Spokane Valley, East Valley High School, and my dad would take me to 3-4 games a year. I watched Jack Thompson play when I was a kid. But even more than going to the games, I remember being out in the garage. We were always working in the garage, my dad and I, on something, and listening to Bob Robertson call the game.
Yeah.
And I can remember my dad, they'd be up by 12 points, and then there'd be a fumble and an interception, and my dad would say, "God damn, Cougs can't stand prosperity." He was upset all the time. Then they'd come back and there'd be some thrilling comeback. And I just remember the beautiful, beautiful way Bob called the game and listening to those on those fall days in the garage with my dad. So really, that's all I wanted to do was be a Coug. There really never was any other choice for me. It was just that simple. I'm a Coug.
Yeah.
Well, you were there in the Edward R. Murrow School of Communications, and you obviously developed the talent that has amassed these years within broadcasting. How did you come to find your voice and your storytelling? How did you discover that, or how did you know that that was going to be your path?
When I was 10 years old, there was a Monday night football game between the Rams and the Vikings. I've even gone back and pinpointed the exact day. And I was enthralled with Howard Cosell calling the game. And half the guys in the room thought he was an ass, and half the people thought he was fantastic. I thought he was fantastic. I loved how everybody had an opinion about him. Yeah, and from that day forward, I was going to be a sportscaster. I mean, there was no other plan. All my eggs were in that basket. I took debate so I would, improve. I was on the school newspaper. I read voraciously. Everything was aimed at getting into broadcasting, and it just didn't change. I never veered away. And so I went to Wazoo. And, I have 2 great stories about Glenn Johnson, the PA voice of the Cougs who ran Cable 8. And the first one is he almost ended my career before it ever started. And that's because going into my senior year, it was sort of set up that I had to take this class 365, which was working on Cable 8. And the idea was you get some stories together, and with those stories, you get your internship, and with that internship, you get your job. But I was set up so that I could take it twice. I could take it first semester and last semester. So because I'm a genius, I decided, hey, this is fantastic. I can just screw around for a semester. I can get decent grades without even trying in that class. I was fairly gifted at that stuff. And then I'll really buckle down the last semester, right? I'll have fun the first semester. So I did. I think I got a B+ or something without even really trying. So now the second semester comes up, and now I'm really going to buckle down and do this thing that I need to do. And I don't get the class. Like, I put in for it, but I didn't get it. And I thought, well, I'm pretty sure I'm one of Glenn's favorites. So I went to visit Glenn, and I said, there's been a horrible mistake, Glenn. I didn't make it in the class, and I desperately need to do this. And he said, Eric, you've got a lot of talent. I can't do his voice. Nobody.
That was pretty good. That was pretty good.
You've got a lot of talent, but I don't think you want it badly enough. He said, there's people with less talent than you that want it more than you do. So no, there's no room in the class, he said.
Wow.
And it was a gut punch, I was shattered and panicked. I panicked. So I decided I had to take drastic measures. So I showed up every day for 4 days at his office before he got to work. And he'd walk into work with his briefcase and stuff. And I'd say, Glenn, I'm just here to make sure that there might not be another opening that I can get into the class. Nope, Eric, there's no opening. Sorry, but there's just no room for you. And on the 4th day, he said, Eric, I just wanted to see if you had the desire that's necessary for this business. And now I think you've shown me that you do. As it turns out, there is one spot left in the classroom. So I was back in business, man. So that had a profound effect on me, man. You never let off the gas. In my profession, you never, ever let off the gas. And I never did again. I can promise you I never let off the gas again. But the other thing was we used to do a half-hour show on Fridays. The Cable 8 News was 15 minutes Monday through Thursday and then half an hour. So if you got to anchor, you only got to anchor the half-hour show one time in a semester. And my time to anchor the half-hour show afterwards, Glenn came up and he said, Eric, you have some talent, and I think you have what it takes to do this job. Wow. And I was like, boom, right? That's all you, as a kid, that's all you need is someone like that to believe in you.
Absolutely.
And it was huge. It was huge. It was very, very important in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. I got chills listening to, you have to realize, Eric, obviously Glenn is your, he's one of your role models. I know that Bob Robertson was a big role model for you. I just want you to know that you play that role in my life and many other Cougs' life at this point. That's where you
really?
reach to get to this. Yeah, at this point, absolutely, 100%. So
that's really cool to hear. After you retire, you don't think about stuff. You hear this from athletes all the time. I never thought about the stuff when I was playing. It's afterwards. And after retiring, you start to look back and you think, I don't know, did any of it really matter? What did it all amount to? And how do I feel about the body of work? And that makes me feel great. That makes me feel great. Because I got lots of letters from other people that felt the other way, in case you're wondering.
They were all just jealous Huskies.
Damn Husky dogs.
Well, I still vividly remember, I think I was 7 years old at the time, and the Cougs were playing the Huskies. It was the 2004 Apple Cup on ABC, and there was a pregame show that you did, and you had Jack Thompson, and you had, I'm trying to remember the Husky running back that you had on, Greg
Lewis.
Yes, Greg Lewis.
For a Husky.
And that pregame show had me hooked. There is all kinds of, you did the tailgating segment. You dressed up Greg Lewis's daughter in Cougar football gear.
Okay, I don't remember that. I don't even remember that. But that sounds like something I would do if I got it.
Yeah, but my favorite segment of the whole thing was you and Jack Thompson vandalized a purple and gold fire hydrant.
Yes, you saw that?
Oh yeah, and you had your voices masked, your identity's blurred, and then at the very end, all that went away, and it was you and Jack just giggling and laughing, running down the road.
Okay, can I tell you the story behind that?
I want to hear it.
story. That is so great that you brought that up and that you were actually watching. So Jack and I both lived in the Magnolia neighborhood here in Seattle, and he lived about 2 blocks from me. And we had a guy, he was a baseball coach and a teacher, I believe, and he lived down on the corner a couple blocks from me, and he had this purple and gold fire hydrant, and it was just every time you drove by, you're like, oh, shut up, And so the night before, we got our kids, his kids, Jack Jr., Tony, my son Jack, and Jack and I, and we put on masks, and then it was like 3 a.m. We woke up all the kids at 3 a.m. and went down there, and it was pitch dark. We're really nervous that someone's going to call the cops and, whatever. We're grown men. Nothing bad was going to happen. But listen, late at night when you're kind of vandalizing something, you're nervous, right? So we finish up. So we paint the bottom part of the fire hydrant crimson. And then the top part, the rounded part, we painted gray. And God, we thought it looked just beautiful, but it's very dark. And so we're just slopping that on there and getting it just right. And then we sneak away and we're giggling and laughing. We really had a blast. I got up in the morning before I went to the game, and I drove down to admire our handiwork. And sadly, all the gray had dripped down onto the crimson. And it was a sloppy mess, and it looked like a couple of third graders had done it. It was yet another embarrassment for Cougar Nation, right?
Oh, my goodness.
And the guy later said, the phrase that cannot be spoken. He goes, "Oh, yeah, you guys couged it." I was so glad. But then he was my co-host for the post-game show. And the Cougs, we did that pregame show. Lewis couldn't join us for a while, so I had a whole segment with just me and Jack. Cougs got killed in that game, I'm sorry to report, and it was not good. And as we're setting up, now the game ends, and then there's people rushing, bringing in the chairs, they're setting up the camera, and we're ready to do the show. Our backs are to the field. The stands are over here, and this group of Husky kids had seen the fire hydrant thing, and they're like, "Hey!" And we're getting ready. We're going to be on in like a minute, right? We're bummed about the game. These kids are like, "We saw your fire hydrant thing. You suck!" And now they're going 5, 4, 3. These kids start a chant as we're starting the postgame show of Eric Johnson sucks. Eric Johnson sucks over and over. And I'm like, in a career that has a few low points, that was the lowest point of my career. And to make things even worse, I asked Jack a couple questions, and then we made it through like the first segment, and then I had a longer segment coming up. After the first segment, Jack goes, "Sorry, man, I can't do this shit." Rips off the microphone and he walks off and leaves me all alone. And I suck. Oh my God. That was the loneliest moment of my career for sure.
Oh my goodness. Oh.
Class.
Yeah.
By the way, speaking of Jack, one last thing about Jack, check out this picture of Jack from the Street and Smiths. What do you notice about that picture?
I mean, I knew he was old, but I thought he played with face masks at least.
That's right. There's no face mask. It's like Norm Van Bronklin or something. Bobby Lane from the. He says they asked him to do that, but I think he's from the a bygone era when there were no face masks.
Yeah, I think his face was just so beautiful that they were like, "We can't cover it with a face mask.
Cover it up.
We gotta show the whole thing."
Oh man. Anyway, we have good times. Awesome. We have good times, we Cougars, don't we?
We do. We do.
Well, speaking of good times, do you have a favorite memory or a favorite moment when you were a student at WSU that still stands out to you to this day?
That I can talk about?
That you remember?
You know, I had a moment that lives in infamy in my soul. I was at the COUG with about 12 friends, guys and girls, and we were all gathered around one of the round tables. And I have a buddy named Terry Killam. And Terry said, all of a sudden he goes, I have an announcement to make. He said, as a Canadian, I challenge Eric Johnson to a drinking contest for the honor of our two great nations. And now I happen to have been pretty good at the old, you know, opening up the throat, the beer goes down. And I'm like, you're out of your mind. I'll kill you. And he's like, bring it on, Johnson. And everyone's like, go it, do it. Right. So they pour us each a pint, full pint.
Oh my gosh.
1, 2, 3, go. All our friends are circled around laughing and cheering. 1, 2, 3, go. Guzzling as fast as I can. Oh man, I really did it fast. But right before I got it down, he beat me.
Oh no.
You got to be kidding. And I said, bull, do it again. So they filled him up. 1, 2, 3, go, boom. He barely beats me again. Everyone is laughing hysterically at me. They're just going crazy. Oh my God, they're on me, right? And I can't believe it. I cannot believe that he could beat me like that. Let's do it again. Okay, they filled up a third pint. 1, 2, 3, go. And this time I'm giving it everything I have. And he beats me for a third time. Humiliating, right? And I'm sitting there and I go, I got to hand it to you. You beat me fair and square. And then someone comes up and goes, look behind him. And I walked around behind him. There was a giant puddle of beer. He'd been doing this, you know, pouring the beer out and then putting it down before me. I will never forgive him for that. He's dead to me.
Honestly, though, I understand you had the weight of a nation on your shoulders.
A nation. Oh, God. I feel like I let America down. Crazy.
You didn't disappoint because you didn't take the easy way out. He took the husky way out, and you.
You know, and now the night's early, and I've got 3 pints in me. You know, and that was pretty smart. I have to for a Canadian, he was pretty smart. That was pretty smart.
Now the question is, do you still have a relationship with this Canadian?
We do. We do have a relationship. Yes, we're still good buddies.
That's awesome.
But it comes every time I see him, it comes up. And that's again, that's part of not just that period in your life, but that period in your life in that place is just such a special thing. You know, we're at the COUG, we're at a little pub on the edge of campus. We're not at some nightclub in Seattle, you know.
Yep.
We're in this intimate setting with close friends, and we're making our own fun.
Right.
Not just at the COUG, but in other ways. You know, we make our fun. We care for each other. We exist in that special place for 4 years, and then are spit out into the world. And I just think I'm proud of that place. I'm proud to have been there.
Yeah.
I was so proud of it. I didn't leave. I'm still here. didn't want to leave the Palouse. So some of us never grow up. Some of us just stay in Neverland
forever. So you live there now. Are you going to stay there, do you think?
That's the plan. Yeah. So we actually bought the house. My grandparents bought a house on campus here on Maple Street in 1991. It's the house that my parents lived in when they were married and going to Washington State.
Wow.
All my cousins, the whole family.
Story.
Yeah, it's awesome. And so I grew up coming to games over here, and whoever was at WSU would just let me sleep on the floor in a sleeping bag or, you know, just wherever. And so when my wife and I got to live here when we were in grad school, my grandparents were considering selling the house. And I was not going to let that happen. So I bought it from him. And here I am.
great place to raise kids. Although I would say one problem with living in Pullman is that you're going to keep getting older, and all the students stay the same age, right? So that aging process is exaggerated for you.
I'm feeling it already. Yeah, the neighbor kids kind of look at us sometimes with the stroller and the dog, and they're like, "You don't look like you belong here." But
that's funny.
We love it. We just become really great friends with whatever kids are living in the houses on either side of us, and then in the summer we got the whole place to ourselves, which is pretty great too. So
that's cool. Yes,
we love it.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Good for you. Well done. Well done. That's
appreciate it.
Well, I get to look at it kind of like it being Disneyland for me, because to me, Pullman is kind of like my Disneyland. So I enjoy it that much. It's always a special treat to be able to go back, and it's a little bit more affordable than Disneyland. So there you go.
And it changes, but it doesn't change. That's what I think is fascinating.
Yeah.
They add things. They build out. It's beautiful what they've done. The town gets bigger. There's more options. But really, the guts of the place, the heart and soul of the place remains the same.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I love, is that I really feel a kinship with the students there, because if you've gone to school there, it doesn't matter. For me, it was 81 to 84. Or if it's 2021 to 2025, it's essentially in many ways the same experience, right?
Yep.
The isolation that's hard to get used to, and then you come to love it, walking on the hill, those hills, they can't fix those hills. You still got to climb up those hills, whether it's snowing or not. And,
yep.
It's just such a great experience. And I used to think as a student, well, maybe everybody feels this way about their school, and I'm sure they do to some degree, but I still think our place is different. I think it's different. I think it's special, and I can't prove that because I never went to school at Michigan or any of these other places. But I think our place is special.
Agreed.
Yeah, we agree 100%.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, Eric, you talked about change. You were at KOMO for a long time amongst other broadcast news stations. How has local journalism changed since you started? Yeah,
it's changed. It's changed a lot. Social media changed us. It used to be in the television news business, you'd have some story and you didn't know if the other guys had the story or not. So you sit on it, right? And then you lead with the story, and everyone would gather around the TVs to see if the other stations had it. And if they didn't have it, everyone would be like, yes, we kicked their asses. Or, oh, God, they got it too. It was this nightly win-loss thing. Social media changed that to the point where most stuff is immediately fed into the social media machine to be the first with it there. And the show itself almost sometimes feels like an afterthought, because everybody really, all in this world that we live in, everybody already knows or has a pretty good idea of what's happening.
Right.
As a sportscaster back in the day, early on, I mean, we're going way back here, but not all Mariner games were on TV. I mean, there were like a lot of games that weren't televised. And so the only way you could watch your highlights of the game were to go to the Kingdome and watch the game, or to wait till 11:20 when those guys did their sports. Now, if you haven't seen the highlights by 11:20, you are not trying, right? I mean, it's on your phone, it's everywhere. It's on your computer. So all that has changed. It's been a lot of change. What hasn't changed is that our job is to find the truth and to hold the powerful accountable, to ask questions that need to be asked, whether it's of a mayor or a head football coach. That part of it hasn't changed. And although, there are a lot of forces fighting against good journalism, there's a lot of undermining of journalists, and we're in a tough time right now. But there will always be a place for good journalists fighting to dig up the truth and to tell the truth. And it's incredibly important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You might have touched on it a little bit there, but as I was preparing for this and I told my family, you know, we're going to get to talk to Eric Johnson, one of the things that they wanted me to ask you, and I was like, that's a great idea, is just what was your secret? You have this ability to put these words together, again, that resonate with people. And we talked a little bit about what you did for the Cougs and talked and the stories you did on Cougs, but it didn't matter. You had this ability to tell a sports story and have my mom crying on the couch next to me, whether she cared about that sport or not. So what was it about your, you know, storytelling style and your reporting style that that made you stand out?
People always want a secret. They want to know the special magic sauce, right? And when I talk to Murrow students, I say the same thing every time, and I can just feel their eyes roll like, oh God, old guy telling us the same thing over and over. But really, it hasn't changed. I always say the secret is to read good books carefully, to look at the way the words work, to feel something when you read a good book, and then to ask yourself, why did I feel that? What did that writer do a chapter ago or a page ago to set up this moment where I felt something? It's all a process. It's all a jigsaw puzzle. And so that's, for me, that's a huge part of it. Not everybody wants to hear that. Blah, blah, blah. Read. You got to read.
Yeah.
Reading is where you get ideas. It's how you understand the way words flow, what words work, what words don't work, what the rhythm of your speech is. I did a documentary about a young swimmer named Marin Morrison. And, you know, she had a horrible disease and continued to swim. And then she swam in the Paralympic Games. Just this courageous young woman who eventually died from her cancer. And when I was voicing this was probably 15 years ago, 20 years ago, I couldn't get the voicing right. I couldn't get my voice to a place where it accurately felt like I was responding to this story that I was telling. I can't really describe it. And I kept doing it over and over and over again till I got it right. And my dear friend and editor, Darren Tegman, who put the piece together for me, said that's when I learned how to voice. I was 40-something years old. Maybe I was 50 years old. Okay, it took me that long to if you've watched some of my early stuff, please don't. It's my voice is like this. I sound like an old guy from the 1950s talking about sports, you know. And it took me a long time to find the voice that I'd been searching for my entire career. I just didn't know how to find it. And in the recording booth, working on that one piece, it all sort of came together. So, but yeah, I don't have any magic. There's no magic pills. It's, you know, you look for new ways to say the same thing. You try to be creative. You try to have heart. I always say to myself, how could I say this better? If I'm using pedestrian words, find a different word. You know, get a thesaurus, find a different word, use your creativity, come at it from a different angle. So anyway, those are just things.
I think that something that you didn't say, but I could hear throughout your process, is just that determination and mindset that you were going to tell the story the way it deserves to be told. And it doesn't matter if you have to say it over and over and over again, or find a new word to describe it. You're not going to settle for okay. You're going to make it great.
It's a responsibility, Drew. If I'm telling somebody's story, I did a story on Bob Robertson that I'm very proud of. And in that story, we found some old film of Bob Robertson doing a game. He's got some papers in his hand. He's got no color commentator. He's got no stat guy. And he is rattling, bam, 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 bam. And just like a machine gun, he's doing this. And it was just the most, I watched it and I'm like, God, this guy's a genius. So now how do I describe that? Right. How do I live up to what that man was doing, right? So I remember one of the phrases I used was a voice like a chainsaw cutting through Cougar Gold cheese.
Yep.
Right? Now I grabbed a thing that all Cougs understand, and I've also used a descriptive way to describe his voice, and it just came together, and I thought that was cool. That made me proud to write that for him.
Yeah.
So you just look for things. What I always say is, and in any profession, when you are inspired, right, you're an artist. If you perform when you're inspired, oh God, now I feel the words coming. Now I got to write it down.
Yeah.
But when you perform because you have to,
Right.
because there's a deadline, now you're a professional.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Either way, it's got to get done. You can wait to be inspired, but at some point you got to put pen to paper and make that thing happen.
That Bob Robertson story is one that I've watched a lot of times, and it stands out to my dad and I because, like you said, a lot of those games weren't on TV even when I was younger, and he was the one that brought the game into your living room. And I'm always able to hold on. I'm always able to not tear up or get emotional. It starts to hit me a little bit when he talks about his wife, and then when you had him say the line, "This is Bob Robertson reminding all Cougs to be a good, to always be a good sport and be a good sport always." And it's like, then the tears flow every time. Just gets me because he got it, right? Yeah.
You know, he would jump in his car every week, every game, drive from Tacoma all the way to Pullman. He's in his 80s, late 80s. Get in his car, drive home. I mean, just really.
Yeah.
I don't think the world ever really, truly, even to this day, understood how really great he was at what he did.
Yeah.
Legend.
Yeah. I just love the way he would tell these details that, like, you would think you'd listen and you say, that's not necessary. And then you start thinking, no, well, it actually is necessary. You know, he'd say, Alex Brink gets under center, single back in the running back. He sends a man in motion, drops back fast, throws on. You know, you're like, why do I need to know that Brink changed the play at the line of scrimmage? Well, I was picturing it, you know? I just was. So
he did baseball games in Tacoma, and they wouldn't let him travel with the team. And so he had a little piece of wood that he would hit against another piece of wood when the ball was hit. So he'd get a ticker tape telling him ball 1, strike 1, foul ball. And he'd say, oh, fouled off in the backside. Kid makes a great grab or whatever it is. He was making up this game off the top of his head that he isn't actually watching. He did that for years. Yeah. Anyway, loved him dearly. Great man.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting, like hearing you guys talk about it within the historical fashion that you and context that you both grew up with. I grew up in a different setting, and you know, I go back and I listen to some of his calls that are so famous, and you know, I'll just briefly share. Drew and I got connected because of all his videos that he has posted throughout the years around Washington State, and there are all these hype videos, and a lot of them include him. And I'm listening to these calls, and they're just signature calls that you know, resonate with you. And you know, going back to the story that you posted, it really resonated with me in such, you know, a shortened amount of time relative to, you know, the experience of and life of being a Coug, but it has become my life. But I will say that there was one story that really resonated with me. Another Coug was, and I already shared this with you before we got on, Eric, was James Donaldson. Um, and just hearing his story and knowing where he was and having similar feelings in my life prior was just it was great. And it resonated with me and I connected very well. So I thank him and I thank you for being able to share that story. So
well, that you just touched on, the power of stories, the power of storytelling. Somehow that touched a part of you, and you saw yourself in his struggle, and you were touched because he was so open about his struggle, so willing to put out his arms and take in anyone else who might be struggling with the same thing. Very brave, very brave. And those are the stories you asked. We talked earlier. You have to be so careful with that story, right?
Yeah.
This man is pouring his heart to me, and I have a responsibility. It can't just be good. Good has never been what I was going for with those stories. It's got to be great.
Yeah.
And in that story, I remember the shot of me, all 5'9" of me, walking side by side with this 7'2". I mean, it was comical, but human, Anyway,
Yeah.
well, thank you for remembering that.
Yeah. Well, and May is Mental Health Awareness Month, just as a general thing, and that was what the story was about James Donaldson. So I want to obviously bring attention to that, and particularly since I work in mental health space now.
Yeah,
So
great.
Thank you.
Good for you. Thank you. Yeah. Important stuff. Incredibly important stuff. It never stops being important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we've poured our hearts out and told us a few of our favorite of your stories. Do you have one? I mean, you mentioned the Bob Robertson one, but do you have one that you just, to this day, just hits so?
They're like your children. I pour my guts into each and every one. I think we ended up with, of just the Eric's hero stories, 340 of them, I think we did. And then there's all the Eric's little hero stories. And then there's, stories that I did when Kathy Gertson passed away and when my close friend Bob Thronson passed. I can't, but I will tell you, about a story that tickled me just in huge ways. We had an intern named Josh Glick. And Josh Glick was this sweet kid. He always wore khakis and a white shirt. And he was just a doggone it, he's going to get the job done kind of kid. So back to Jack Thompson. Jack did put on a sports clinic in White Center every summer. And so I told Jack we'd come out there to do a story on it, but I couldn't do it because it was too close to showtime. So I sent Josh Glick out to talk to Jack Thompson. And I told Josh before he left, and this kid would do anything. I mean, he was just, I can do it, man. I said, listen, here's what you're going to do. You're going to ask Jack about his camp and get a good soundbite about the camp. And then there are 3 questions I want you to ask him. And you have to keep a straight face and don't be scared. Can you do this? And he said, I can do this. So they're all set up. He asked Jack about the camp. Well, it's this camp. I think it's important to give back to my community. And then Josh Glick said, is there anything left in that used up rag arm of yours? And Jack looks at him and he goes, and now you have to understand, there he is in his little khaki pants. Jack's a full foot taller than him. And Jack goes, yeah, I can still throw the ball. And then Josh Glick says, is it true that you never beat the Huskies? And Jack's like, yeah, we gave it a shot and it didn't go our way. And then Josh goes, this kid's a legend at KOMO television. He goes, my dad says you were way overrated. Would you like to comment? No, I don't think I could do this justice, but Jack's looking down at this kid. And I took this and I circled him and I go, now watch his eyes. And Jack did, have you ever had a badass dude do this to you? He started at the kid's eyes And then he just looked all the way down his entire body. And he goes, sounds like your dad is a husky. And at that point, Josh, gave it up. Eric made me do it. I mean, Josh, that said that his sister at that point, who was off to the side, was ready to kick Josh's ass. And Jack had this, oh my God. So that kid is a legend. Josh Glick, wherever you are, absolute legend, because he kept a straight face. My dad says you were way overrated. Would you like to call me? Oh my God. Brilliant,
that's
right?
gold.
So fun. So fun.
That's a great story.
I've been a thorn in Mr. Thompson's ass for a long time, and I'm proud of it. Great stories. Other great stories that I love. I did a speaking of mental health, I did a documentary about Tyler Holinsky that I was very proud of. When you're coming on I-90 and you cross the bridge, and then up on the right are the wild horses, the Wild Horse Monument.
Yep.
I did a story on the guy that built that.
Oh wow!
I loved that story. So I love them all, man. You care about them. I care about them all. I don't love them all, but I care about them all. And
they're like your kids.
Yeah,
your stories are like your kids.
Kind of like your kids. Kind of like you. Some of them you think the world's going to go crazy for, and it doesn't. And then some of them, you just kind of throw it out there and you don't think it's that great. And then the world goes nuts. It goes viral. You can never predict. You can never predict.
Yeah.
Are there any ways in your retirement that you're still, obviously, like when you have a passion like storytelling like this, it really never goes away. No. What are some of the ways you're channeling this without having the platform that you had?
I'm writing. Writing. I've kicked around the idea of doing a podcast. I have a great idea for a podcast. I don't know if I'll ever do it. We'll see. Doing a little public speaking. So, I mean, I'm still kind of, I'm never not looking for a story, even though I don't really have a platform anymore. Yeah. I still love the idea of telling stories. So you got to understand, my dad was a fireman, and I grew up going to his fire station, 3 times a week, because it was right next to my school. So my mom would drop me off at the fire station, and then I'd hang out with the firemen for like an hour, and then I'd go to school. And then after school, I would walk to the fire station. And these guys were storytellers. I mean, you're talking about my storytelling. Nothing. The best storytellers I've ever heard were the firemen at Station 4 in Otis Orchards, Washington. And I would just sit there and listen to I would listen to the rhythm of their voices, and I would listen to the way they would pause for effect and continue with the story. And so that's really where I got my chops in some ways, is listening to the firemen tell their stories.
Wow.
That's fascinating. This is in no way related, and we can always cut this out. My brother, he grew up listening to like news anchors and radio hosts. Mind you, he's autistic, but he has a fascination for the way in which people speak and orate. He loves like Hal Fishman down at KTLA, and I grew up watching Charles Osgood on Sunday morning and loved all those stories and everything. So listening to you speak to that, I'm like, my brother, he doesn't quite have a lot of, he doesn't speak, in so many candid words all the time, unless he's really spoken to, but he's very, he could speak clearly and enunciate well. It's just that there's that fascination, and hearing you, it just reminds me of my childhood, watching my brother, like literally listening to the radio for voices, just to hear how they're orating and telling a story. So to hear, it's almost like your process evolved from that fire station into what it's become now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, in the previous era before myself and my generation of broadcasters, everyone was a stylist. I don't know if either of you remember Bruce King, but I eventually replaced Bruce King on KOMO. He was the sports guy and a legend, and he had a very dramatic flair. And he would say, play of the night, and so everyone had a style,
Yeah.
and I think we've lost that, and I think it's to our detriment, not to be over the top all the time, but I always tell kids, listen, you're all the same. You have to find a way to stand out.
Yeah.
Or else you're just going to get chewed up by the business and spit out. You have X amount of time, a couple years, get your own style, make your own, creative choices, find a way to stand out. If you don't do that, you're just another blah, blah, blah. Yep. And it's very important. You don't need to be, a crazy, over the top personality, but you have to find your way of differentiating from the crowd. And that's a very difficult thing to do.
Yeah. I honestly had no idea how spoiled I was as a kid to have Bob Robertson on the radio, have Keith Jackson on the TV, and then if you're in the stadium, you had Glenn Johnson. I mean,
Glenn Johnson. And then think about Seattle.
Yeah.
Seattle had,
Niehaus,
Kevin Calabro. Just some of these amazing voices that come along, and people to look up to and enjoy, and they make your life better. They make your life better.
Yeah, that was my childhood. Was my dad and I would play this game where I would say a radio call or a TV call, and he would have to tell me which game it was.
Oh my God, that's pretty great.
And we'd go back and forth, and so I would say, Bledsoe has all day to throw it. Now he goes deep, caught. And he'd be like, oh, 92 Apple Cup, and so we'd quiz each other back and forth. But again,
or the Chambly right fair, Chambly right fair. Oh God,
up the middle. Yeah, and again, like you turn on ESPN now, and everybody sounds the same, and it's not what it was. So
yeah.
Who's the guy for Fox? Is it Gus Johnson?
Gus Johnson is pretty good.
I actually think he's pretty good.
Yeah, he's good. He's good.
Yeah.
He's really. I'll tell you, the greatest of all time. He's not just the greatest of all the time. He's the greatest of all time, and everybody isn't even within shouting distance, and that's Vin Scully, the Dodgers broadcaster.
I'm so glad you brought up Vin Scully. I grew up in LA. We would listen on the radio to and from baseball practices with my dad on the way to the game or leaving early.
Hey.
No way. Vinny.
And it says Vin.
Yep.
In Dodger blue. And oh my God, you're right.
I had three great broadcasters. Three. Vin Scully.
Dick Hearn.
Yep.
Who was the third?
The third was Bob Miller for the LA Kings.
Oh, yeah.
We had hockey. I mean, he's an icon. I mean, he's not, they had, what's his name that transferred, I forget from which organization, but he did all the NBC finals and everything. And yeah, I mean, Bob Miller, you should go back. I'll send you a link of his 2012 Stanley Cup call from when they won.
I love it. You guys are total nerds. You're total nerds about this, and I love it. I really do.
Well, even I was just gonna say I listened to it repeatedly, almost like my brother, because he listens to things on repeat, and I'm like, oh God, I can't get over it. It evokes emotions in you because I grew up with my dad who would go down to the Great Western Forum in LA and would go and get a seat right at the glass for $10 like the day of the game because they got there in 68 and you could show up at any given moment and just get a ticket with ease. And when I was going as a kid, mind you, they got season tickets before Gretzky got there, and then Gretzky got there and
he shows up. Yeah.
And then it's chaos because you can barely get seats and it's getting expensive to hold season tickets. And I would go season ticket holder with my dad and mom occasionally to different games. And I just grew up around sports loving it. Same thing with the Dodgers. We barely went to the Lakers because those were the most expensive tickets.
Very expensive. I'll tell you something to look up on YouTube since you're complete broadcast dorks, I can tell, is to Vin Scully's last inning of, I believe, a Sandy Koufax, might have been a perfect game or just one of his no-hitters. And what he does is he sets the stage and he says at the beginning of the inning, it's 7:22 in the city of Angels, and the crowd is restless, and the blah, 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 blah. Jim so-and-so at the plate hits a fly ball caught by blah, blah, blah. It is 7:56. And he kept telling the time.
Yeah.
Because he knew that this was special and that it was historic. And by simply giving the time every time something happened, it reminded the listeners that this is history. You know, it's something as simple as that. It's just an artist, an absolute artist behind a microphone. No color guy. No color guy.
No
analytics. Not boring the hell out of us with rotation rate and, you know, all this
exit velocity, all that crap.
Velocity. No, storytelling and the soul of the game. You know, it's amazing.
It's, you know, just you saying that, my dad and I have always expressed that Vin Scully is in a class of his own because he could literally tell a story amidst the pitches and everything about, you know, the player, you know, that's coming up to bat, or perhaps the pitcher, and you're just listening and you're just in complete awe because you're like, how does he put this together? I mean, granted, he has a team that works for him that helps him, but he's the one that pieces the puzzles together at the end and puts it into such a poetic way that it sounds so eloquent, you know? Yeah.
There's the handful that we love, you know, and Bob is right up there.
Yeah.
You know, legends.
Yeah. Eric, you've got a voice and presence people know instantly. Do you ever get recognized in funny or unexpected places?
Oh God, yes. I mean, the answer is yes. I'm trying to think of specific bizarre circumstances, but you know, it's always, you know, you're in some heartfelt discussion. You know, let's say your child is, you know, sad or something, and you're this heartfelt discussion, and someone comes over, I just want to say I love those little heroes, you know. I mean, I'm always gracious because, man, when you can get to a place where people walk up to you and tell you that they appreciate you, it really is an incredibly great feeling. But there are moments where you're just like, dude, and can't you see what I'm doing here? You know, I can't think of any real specific. I know there are bizarre ones, and as soon as we're done, I'll think of 100. But you know, mostly people are so sweet, and the people that think I'm an idiot generally don't say it to my face. So it's this constant positive reaction, you know, of like, hey, man, thanks for the stories, and I'm like, God, thank you. You know, listen, I need to say this working in this city and covering the things that I have covered in this city, including the Cougar, this was my dream. This was all I ever dreamed. I didn't dream beyond this. And for this to happen, to have people stop and say thank you, or, I get constantly asked about a documentary I did called Seattle is Dying. And for people to come up and say thank you or ask a question, you know, that's the dream. That is the broadcasting dream. That's your dream. I can tell it's your dream doing this podcast, right? Yeah. Is to touch people, to inform, but also to make people feel something. That's why you're doing a podcast, and more power to you. But it's a good feeling.
Speaking of good feelings, we talked about how great it is to be a Coug. And you touched on it a little bit, how the importance of Cougs helping other Cougs. That's really at the heart of the alumni base, is that we all want to help each other out. There's so many of us in so many different fields. Jack came on here, talked a little bit about the mission of Cougs First. What is that mission to you, and what about that mission kind of inspires you to keep it going?
I love the idea. The events, for me, are just a way of getting all those Cougs in one place. We've all spent a chunk of our lives in this similar place. We have an understanding. If you're a Coug and I'm a Coug and you're 26 and I'm 63, I don't care. I have an understanding. I know something about you if you went to that place and stayed there. So I think it's a celebration of all that is Cougar. And it's an acceptance and an understanding that we know. I look at you both and I know about you without knowing you. I know you're a Coug, and that tells me a few things: that you don't take yourself too seriously, right? That you learned about community when you were in this place, that you have maybe an underdog mentality, and that fuels your drive in life. I can tell things about Cougs. So when we all get together, that's why we're so happy and so comfortable together.
Yeah.
Is that we have this base of commonality. And so that's what Cougs First celebrates. And of course, the idea of Cougs helping Cougs. And you need to buy a car. Why not buy it from a Coug? You need insurance. Hey, so-and-so knows a guy. He's a great Coug, blah, blah. Now, there's a level of comfort with that insurance salesman or that car salesman. There's a level of understanding. That car guy, he's not going to screw me over. I'm a Coug, and he's a Coug.
Right.
He knows that there's a barrier he cannot cross, right? And so I think it's just a beautiful recognition of this thing that we feel and we can't always put words to. And I think it's important to celebrate that and recognize it as much as we can.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, we'll be there. We'll be interviewing Cougs, letting them tell their story, getting a mic in front of them and asking them the best questions that we can so that we can just, that's really, you talked about our goal in this whole thing. Honestly, we just want to be a microphone for Cougs to tell their story, to talk about why Washington State was so important to them, to talk about what they're doing now to help out the university that gave so much to them. So we're looking forward to doing that there.
Can I tell you about a book I want to write? Before I die, I want to write this book. And it's the premise of it is very simple. You just sort of touched on it. I just want to get random Cougs, all different ages, and just say, tell me your best story, your best Wazoo story. And I just want each one to be like 2 pages long.
Yep.
Just quick little stories, this crazy thing that, like my beer story, the guy throwing the beer.
Yeah.
Whatever. The Eric Johnson sucks story, Tell me your best college story. Some of them could be risque. Some of them can be drunken escapades. Someone could be heartfelt. But just, would that be a great book?
That would be an awesome
incredible
book. Yeah.
Incredible. That's kind of what Jim Walden's Tales from the Cougar Sideline is.
Yes. Yes.
You would have to read those, though, Eric. You would have to read them, so it would have to be verbal within its own audiobook,
Yeah. I could do the audio version.
For sure.
So anyway, I think you're right. And Cougs First what a great concept, right? What a freaking great idea. That damn Jack Thompson. He's
smart
just
guy.
Everything.
He is. Brilliant. Well, Eric, thank you so much for being with us and giving us your time this evening. And thank you for just being with us and having fun and sharing your insight on so many things. Drew and I will be at Cougs First on May 9th in Bellevue, and so will Eric. And we look forward to seeing you all there. And this was another episode of the Fieldhouse Report, and we'll see you next time. Go Cougs.
Thanks, guys. Go Cougs.
Go Cougs.